We're in Mark chapter 5. If you want to go ahead and turn to Mark 5. We kind of left off last week in verse 21. You might remember that this is where one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus, came and said his daughter was sick and he wanted Jesus to come and heal her. And on the way to Jairus' house, the walk is among a throng of people, and during that walk, the woman with the issue of blood touches Jesus, and she's healed immediately. And then the word comes to Jesus, comes to Jairus that his daughter has died, and so then you have this really tense moment, probably, that what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And so as they move then to this little girl who's died, Jesus raises her from the dead. Little girl, get up. Little girl, arise. Those kinds of words that Jesus uses there. And immediately she gets up and she begins walking. And Mark gives us information that she was 12 years old. And so this is the last in this series. I think it's 4 miracles that Mark records, and this is the last one in this series of miracles. And you don't have to. One of the things that seems very obvious as you work your way through Mark is that anytime that Jesus is highlighted as being an amazing teacher, or being shown as being one who heals, or being in command of nature or disease or an evil spirit, anytime something like that happens, you can pretty well count on the fact that there's going to be opposition. So that's what happens when you get to chapter 6. You're going to have this series of oppositions, this series of things that are going to highlight that opposition is a reality. Whether you're a follower of mine and you're sent out on a mission, this opposition is a reality. And then what Mark's going to do, he's going to give us another series of miracles. So you've got a series of miracles, 4, and then you've got this highlight of the opposition that comes to Jesus. Those that reject him, those that are not only rejecting him, but those that are accusative, and those that seek to degrade him. And even earlier, you remember in the book where they sought to kill him from that point forward. And then Mark's going to record another series of 3 miracles. So that's kind of where we are, right in the middle. So I'm not going to go back and just spend any time there with that last miracle, the 2 miracles, the healing, the raising of Jairus' daughter, and the woman with the issue of blood. That's just the last one in that series of miracles that Mark records. So what happens immediately in chapter 6, you're going to see that the opposition is going to be clear from those who are in his hometown. But before we go into chapter 6, let me just allow you some time to make any comments you'd like. It doesn't have to necessarily be about this narration of the miracles here in verse 21 and following, but it could be about any of the other miracles or something else at this point. So let me just give you an opportunity to ask any questions or make some observations before we move to the opposition part again. Anything? Okay, so Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, is going to be very straightforward and clear in raising this opposition to Jesus, and them questioning whether Jesus really is valid or not. Is he really of any significance? And the questions are going to come and the observations are going to come, and the result is going to be that even though they marveled, even though they're going to be impressed, even though things are going to be obviously out of this world, spectacular. I mean, you just raised a girl from the dead. So here he is in his hometown. His disciples are there with him, and he's doing things that astonish people. But they're going to be full of unbelief. They're not going to believe. They're not going to believe at all. So somebody would read verses 1 through 6 for us, and we'll start there.
Jesus left there and went into his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many who had heard him were amazed. "Where did this man get these things?" they asked. "What's this wisdom that he has been given? And even does miracles. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among the relatives, and his own house is a prophet without honor." He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith that Jesus went around teaching from village to village.
Okay, thank you. So the observation that is made is that Jesus is teaching, verse 2, he's teaching in the synagogue. By the way, that's one of the things that Mark highlights. You remember it started very early. Chapter 2, he's teaching in the synagogue when the man with the unclean spirit comes to him and approaches him there. So he was teaching in the synagogue, and those who heard him, and here's that word again, astonished, amazed, astonished, flabbergasted. I'm not sure. That's probably not a way they would translate any of that. But those words that demonstrate the fact that they are amazed and they are impressed greatly because of what Jesus does. Specifically here, they're impressed, they are astonished at his teaching. Again, that's been one of those themes that moves through Mark's writings, that is that he is a master teacher. And when people hear him, the response that they have is that of amazement. They are in every way astonished by what he has done, and as a result of that, then they're going to begin to question. So here are some of the questions that they ask. Some of those questions that they ask are, where did this man get the ability to do these things? Where did he get this? Where did he get the ability to do these things? And so the question is asked, where did he get the ability to do this? Where did all this come from? Where did he get this wisdom? What kind of wisdom is it? Where did it come from? How does he do such mighty works by his hands? So they're asking those questions. How does he do this? Where did the power come from? Remember, he was accused of having the power of Beelzebub, so the question is not a new question, really. Where did it come from? How did he get this? And so then they begin to reason. And as they begin to reason, they come to the conclusion that there is no validity in this man, because this man is one that we know. He grew up among us. He is, notice what is said here beginning in verse 3. This is the carpenter, the son of Mary. Now, that would not be unusual to describe somebody like that, because in those days it would be Joseph the carpenter. In our day, it's Joseph Carpenter or Joseph Smith or whoever, but it would be Joseph the carpenter, and they would know him as the carpenter or the carpenter's son or Mary's son, as they describe here. So they describe him as the carpenter, as the son of Mary, and then they begin to highlight his brothers, calling them by name, and then they give the information, and even his sisters are still with us. His sisters still live among us. And then it closes out at the end of verse 3, and it uses this phrase in the English Standard Version, and it says, "And they took offense at him." Now I put a question mark right there, because I want to know why. I want to know what made them take offense. What in this context? We've just read 3 verses, and at the end of that 3rd verse, there is this statement, "And they took offense at him." What is it in what's going on here that caused them to take offense? What is it that caused them to be offended, if that's actually what that says? What is it?
Human nature.
Okay.
My Messiah is not going to be just a carpenter.
Okay, exactly. All right.
I was going to say, when he's teaching, it's his interpretations of Scripture, or the Torah. So they may have not believed what he was teaching, because he's teaching his interpretation. All rabbis taught, well, not all rabbis, some rabbis didn't go strictly by what was written, but their interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe that was what they were saying.
Yeah. Well, the earlier phrase that is said about them, when they hear him teaching, they're astonished. So they were impressed, obviously, but not sure exactly. But I think Ryan is hitting close to what I'm thinking, and that is that this man is a common man. As a matter of fact, he's not just a common man, he's a poor man. They took offense at this.
No, wait a minute. I'm asking.
Oh.
Who took offense? His sisters, his brothers, or these people that were amazed?
These people that were amazed, these people.
Well, his father and his siblings that he took offense, or they took offense.
I see that, but I think it was those who were listening, those that heard him speak, those that heard him teach.
But, you know, at this time, his brothers and sisters didn't believe in him.
Right.
So anyway, they didn't believe in him quite a while. Some of these, what was his age then? At about 30?
Yeah, he's just starting his ministry, so right about 30.
All right, they siblings mentioned him.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them had to be pretty young.
Right.
Okay, I finished mine.
Yeah. I think the context does point to the fact that it's the audience and not the brothers or the family, but I guess the connection could be drawn there because it is following that. But I think as Mark describes it, the audience is amazed, and they begin to deduce that this man is a common man. And this common man doesn't fit the bill of being one who should be able to teach, who should be able to have such wisdom. And so they're going to reject him because he doesn't fit the job description for being one who would be able to change our hearts, for one who'd be able to teach us something that is life-changing and life-altering. So there's that I think enters in when he's teaching. They deduce with these questions, where does the wisdom come from? How do you get it all? And the deduction is because he's just a carpenter. He's Mary's son. We saw him grow up. We knew him as a child. We've seen him. He's just a common man. He's not anything impressive. He has no degrees. He didn't follow a very impressive teacher or rabbi. He didn't do any of those things. So where are his qualifications? We can't have somebody like this leading us. So therein, I think, lies the offense.
The rabbis were amazed at his question.
Yes.
So somebody else was amazed.
Mm-hmm. And it may be some of those same ones that later on decide he needs to die. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, you're right. This is not the first time. So there you are, only through verse 3, and we've come to this point where you see this opposition beginning to well, because there is offense taken, and I believe the offense is taken because he does not fit their qualifications of being one who would be able to sit and teach them about God and about the truth. Okay?
He didn't walk into the synagogue and start teaching. He was invited to teach.
Okay.
I wonder how did that happen? You know, how did he get invited to teach? I mean, and then when they were say, "Oh yeah, well he's just coming in," and all of a sudden he's amazed by what they could do. So somebody else was hung up on the student.
Yeah, that guy probably got in real trouble by the end of this story. Yeah. Okay, so here's the result is going to be, now if you read ahead, you're going to see the end as John read it before, and Jesus marvels because of their unbelief. That's the first part of verse 6. Their unbelief. One of the themes that had been working through those 4 miracles that led up to this was the theme of faith. Jairus came to Jesus with what? Faith. The woman came to Jesus to touch his garment, and the only qualification she had when she came to Jesus was faith. So and I know you may get tired of hearing me say this, but there's this opposition that's going on in the Gospels, not just in Mark, but it's going on through all of the Gospels, and there's this opposition between belief and unbelief, between faith and no faith, between accepting him and rejecting him. And really, even John puts it as plain as it can be put, and he says that you have been given enough information in order to be able to make the proper decision to believe in him. That's what John basically says, John 20, 30, and 31. I've given you enough information to bring you to the point of belief. But what happens in the Gospel of John as John continues to give this information, you've got some who still do not believe. You've got some who refuse to have faith in Jesus. They reject him. Ultimately, they're going to kill him. Same thing here. You've got this opposition not opposition, you've got this difficulty that's going on between faith and no faith, between belief and unbelief. And Mark's playing it out as briefly and succinctly as he can. This short gospel, some of their other stories are a little bit longer. Matthew and Luke's stories are a little longer and a little more detailed at times, but the opposition is still the same, and that is, are you going to come with faith, or are you going to have the result of unbelief? Is it going to be belief or unbelief? So here's what happens after these miracles that highlight the idea that people are coming to Jesus with faith. They're coming to him with nothing but faith. Is it a complete faith? It is a full faith. Is it full grown? Absolutely not. It's not full grown. But they believe in him. They believe that he has power. They believe that there's something special about him, and that's going to be the theme that's going to run all the way through Mark's gospel, and that is there are going to be people that have faith and believe in him, believe he can turn water to wine, that believe he can raise the dead, believe he can heal the sick or cast out demons, or that his teaching is from God. That they're going to believe that, and they're going to then begin to follow him as a result of their faith. Again, not a mature faith, not a complete faith. They don't know everything about him. They don't know all of the details about Jesus, but they know one thing is they need to come to Jesus for the healing or for whatever it is that they need. But now the opposition, and this opposition is going to result in unbelief, verse 6. And before we get there, Jesus begins in verse 4 to talk about, this is that very well-known phrase, or at least something that we're very familiar with. The prophet's not without honor except in his hometown or his own country, among his family or relatives in his own household. He could do no mighty work there except he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them, and he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went out among the villages teaching. He had to move out from his hometown. So there you have this first story of opposition where Jesus has revealed himself. He's teaching in the synagogue. They are astonished, and evidently he just doesn't fit that need that they see for him to be able to be recognized as a God-sent teacher or even the Messiah. All right, observations. Now that's through verse 6 only.
He did in chapter 5 were great things. And I'm going to follow that up. Because in Luke 2, where he stayed behind, his mother and them went out and then they had to go back and get him. The people were amazed there. That was in Jerusalem. But then he went to Nazareth, which is the place that we've got right here. Mm-hmm. And it says that his mother was amazed, and that he grew in wisdom and stature with God and man. So, it makes me wonder why these people in Nazareth and Mark were amazed when, through this whole time, from 12 to maybe 30, they all been able to see how he did and progressed.
Yeah, that's a good question, because from the perspective I was going at, was they knew who he was because they described him to the T. This is the carpenter, it's Mary's son, here are his brothers, they named him, and his sisters are still with us. So they knew who he was. Why weren't they familiar with his teaching from age 12 and up? Why weren't they familiar with that? I don't have that answer. I don't know. Maybe they didn't.
Undoubtedly, when he grew in wisdom and stature, it might have been the word, and people looked up on him as somebody that could trust and admire and something like that. But in Mark 5, he brings the girl back from the dead and different things like that, which was great here at that time. Mm-hmm. So that might have been the reason. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, but the thing about it is, I think that this is kind of the way I would justify what's going on. That is that no matter what he had done, there's some that are going to be dissatisfied. There are some that are going to be full of unbelief no matter what he does. I mean, that's true of all the way through the Gospel of Mark. All the Gospels, as I said, some are going to believe, some are not going to believe. Some are going to accept, some reject. That's just the nature of mankind. So even if they did see him, even if they did know about him, maybe they've just got their mind set against him and they weren't going to accept him no matter what anyway. All right, anything else?
Watching him do all the things that he did, I could try to put myself in that place. Mm-hmm. Nobody else could do it. How could you not?
Yes, and Paul's comment is it would be hard not to believe after you saw what he had done. But again, I go back to human nature. We think if we were in that situation, we would respond perfectly. But obviously, their hearts weren't in the place they needed to be in order for them to respond like we think we would.
Another king rather than Jesus anyway.
Yeah, and I don't, and right here in chapter 6, I'm not sure Jesus I'm not sure I don't know what he said in his teaching, but I'm not sure there's any hint here to the fact that, hey, I'm going to be your Messiah. I'm going to be the leader of the kingdom. It says that when he began to preach, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and Mark's showing us that he is the king that's ushering in the kingdom. But I'm not sure they were well enough informed to make that decision. Well, he wants to be our king. I just think they weren't ready to accept him as a bona fide teacher because of what they knew about him, because of his background. Yeah.
The truth will still reject him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm sure that happened. There were people who probably realized who he really was and rejected him out of selfishness or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's true. You had a comment?
I was gonna say, do you think his age might have something to do with all of that? Those saying as a wise old man, these a young man trying to
30
be
was
wise.
pretty old, man.
Yeah.
At 30, he was
pretty old.
He was. I'm not sure about the life expectancy, but I think it was probably mid to late 30s. So he was an old man. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, Tommy brings up what Jesus actually said to explain this situation, that a prophet being without honor in his own country, his own hometown, among his own people. And here Jesus goes back there, and they remember him as being the carpenter, son of Mary, not as one who brings God to them. They don't see that yet.
Heights as far as maybe political or in the business world and something like that, and you look at it, you're amazed that it happened. You don't think that one from your area can do that.
Right. Yeah, it's a very natural, usual phenomenon that a prophet is without honor in his own community where he grew up. Okay, so he's rejected at home. That's what I've titled this section, verses 1 through 6. So the next thing that's going to happen is Jesus is going to send out his apostles, and he's going to give them power or authority over unclean spirits, and he's going to charge them not to take anything extra with them, no money, no bread. Just wear what you're going to take with you, and you're going to depend upon the benevolence of others. And if someone does not receive you, now I've underlined that in my Bible, if someone does not receive you. So here's Jesus saying to the 12, when he sends them out 2 by 2, he is telling them there's a chance you're going to be rejected. There's a good chance that you're going to meet someone who will reject you and not invite you into their home and not supply you with that which you need. And I think this was probably a twofold sending of his disciples, or purpose in this sending. Obviously, one was to get the message out, but it was also to give them a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like to be accepted by some and rejected by others. So that's really what he says here. And if any place will not receive you and they will not listen to you, so you're going to be rejected. There are going to be those who are going to not listen. There are going to be those who are not going to welcome you. They may even, though he doesn't specifically say this, but it may be that they not only just turn you away, but they're not nice about it. You know how people can be. People sometimes may not be nice. It hasn't been that long ago that I was in a local fast food restaurant. I rarely go in a fast food restaurant anymore, but I happened to go in at this time, and somebody had gone through the drive-through, and they had messed that order up. So I don't know what it was, but she came in, and she was very unhappy, and the people behind the counter were trying to calm her down and keep her from exploding, but she was destined to explode. That was just going to be an explosion. There was going to be. And when she let that bag of whatever was in it go, and it hit the girl at the cash register in the chest, the girl at the cash register just went like, "What did you just do? I can't believe you just did that." I mean, we're calm here on the other side of the counter, but you have just lost your mind. And she walked away without food and without her money. I guess she was happy. I guess she threw her bag and hit somebody, and she was happy. I guess that's what she wanted. So what I'm getting at is sometimes when some people just don't agree with you, sometimes they're not going to be very nice about it. And so that seems to be what Jesus is getting at. He says, whenever you are rejected, whenever they do not receive you, when they don't listen to you, when you leave, shake the dust off of your feet as a testimony against them. Now, in this context, Mark's just been talking about Jesus being rejected in his own hometown. So you're connecting this as Jesus goes into the villages around Nazareth preaching and teaching. That's what it ends in verse 6. So now he tells his apostles to go out on his authority, and I'm going to give you authority. Just take your staff, your shoes, your clothes, nothing extra. You're going to trust God and trust the people to be able to provide for you. You're going to trust in their hospitality. There are going to be times when your teaching will not be tolerated. There's going to be times when you will not be welcomed. Your message will not be welcomed. And then there's this really well-known saying that he uses at the very end, shake the dust off of your feet. That wasn't to get the dust off your feet. The shaking, that phrase and that idea was one that would communicate to anyone, I'm done with you. I'm finished. I've done my duty. I have made my effort. You have refused. You have gone against me, or you've failed to assist me, or you don't want anything to do with my message. And so that is a symbolic way of saying, I release myself of the responsibility to you any longer. Symbolically. Kind of like when Pilate washed his hands. Did that rid him of the guilt of Jesus? No, it was just symbolic. He was washing his hands of the guilt that might be upon him for Jesus' crucifixion. So here, this idea of shaking the dust off your feet would be this way of saying, okay, we're done. We have proclaimed to the people, we've proclaimed that they should repent. Now And it says, verses 12 and 13, they went out, proclaimed that people should repent. They cast out many demons, anointed with oil many who were sick, and healed them. And so you have their efforts somewhat stated there. Then it jumps all the way to verse 30, because in the middle of that you have this story of John the Baptist. So what happens in verse 30, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And so we'll stop there. That's the end of verse 31. So the interlude is this story of John the Baptist. But you when you get to the end of what he says in verse 13, they had healed many, cast out demons, and then when they returned, Jesus says, you know, guys, you hadn't had a chance to rest. Come on, let's go to a desolate place. Let's go to a place where we can rest and take it easy for a while, because you've really not had time to even eat. So that's the story of another opportunity for Jesus to highlight the fact that those who carry his message will also be rejected, like I have been rejected. So there's that message. All right, any observations now about Jesus sending out those 12 and the words of Jesus to them, that if anyone will not receive you, they will not listen, then you've done your duty by preaching to them or teaching them about the will of God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good observation. They were just to take what they had on, and I'm not sure the purpose of. I know what the purpose of carrying the staff was, but why Mark includes that as a part of their equipment here. But yeah, they were to go. They were to go as they were. Not any time to prepare. I don't want you to carry the food with you. Don't fill your pockets full. Yeah, right. Yeah. And we always have 2 or 3 coolers with us, carrying our food. All right, anything else? That's through verse 13, and then picking up again in verse 30, which continues this story of the 12 being sent out into the villages. Oh, good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, I think. Right. 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 Yeah, Glenn's observation is we need to be careful and not be too quick to shake the dust off our feet, to relieve ourselves of any responsibility. Sometimes we do that as an excuse to not have to be involved any longer, and that's not at all the reason that this is in Scripture, for sure. Again, Glenn highlights the fact that we don't have the mind of Jesus, so we don't know sometimes when the exact moment is when we ought to be through.
Keep moving, not to be marred down in defeat, but yet to keep moving forward. And even though that's symbolic, shake the dust of your feet, it would be that psychological, okay, like you said, I think this is the end, we move forward, we go up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's as much because Jesus was more concerned about them getting that message out. And as a result of getting that message out, then that means that someone who says, I don't want to listen, well, you move on. You don't try to, like we would today. We wouldn't say, well, is there anything I can help, other thing I can help you with? No, we're moving on. We're trying to get that message out. And if they won't listen, if they don't want to listen, if they don't accept us, we just move on.
I think what was implied by not taking anything that Jesus said God will take care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. They were depending on God and the benevolence of the people, which obviously God's going to direct that for sure.
Left Israel, as they were coming back in, that's what they would do. They would shake the dust of heathen lands off their feet before they stepped back on the holy land. That's where they had come from.
Okay, yeah, that was the original purpose behind that. I'm sure that really helped. All right, thank y'all for your observation.